I hate thinking that like someone thinks I got something the easy way.
Everything I get, I do have to earn it.
And I think that's kind of where that worker bee mentality comes from. Like, you cannot come at me saying like, you're not good enough or you didn't accomplish blank, because I was busy the whole time. I gave my day like hardest. I worked the hardest here. I showed up the earliest. I left the latest.
Yeah.
So it covers all of my potential holes of like criticism.
If I already know my faults, you can't hurt me with that. Like, I already know, you know, so it's not as painful if somebody's like, you know, you were lazy today. Well, yeah, bitch, I know I was lazy today. And I guess for a long time, I thought it was something to do with control, but I don't think it is. I think it's like like you said, like a safety net. Like it hurts less if I already am aware.
The big hormone enneagram.
Hi, I'm John Lukovich, sexual self-pres for the 5-wing 458 trifix.
Hi, I'm David Gray, self-pres sexual 9 with 1 974 trifix.
What up? It's Emeka. I'm in an 8-wing 7, sexual self-pres with 854 fixes.
Hi, I'm Nancy. I am a self-pres social 3, wing 4 with a 369 trifix. If you like our podcast, guys, make sure you go like and subscribe us on the Apple Podcast app. And if you really like us, you should definitely leave us a review.
So Marina, Beth, and David are all from Texas.
Oh,
We
really?
are?
Go
Yeah.
Oh, I wish that you guys could see me on video because I wear a Texas chain.
Whoa.
That's a real Texan right
Yes.
there.
Yes.
Texans are really proud of Texas. For
We're
sure.
just the shape of the state special.
This is way too much Texas for one podcast.
Yeah.
I think
What is that?
Oh my
What is that? Good, bad, the ugly, like. Woo, woo, woo. That's
Yes.
what spaghetti western shit.
Oh my God.
Welcome to Big Hormone Enneagram. Today we're going to look at 2 sexual sixes. We've been doing an interview series where we're trying to get into the heart and soul of the different types. And basically every single type on the Enneagram, there's all these really bad stereotypes and shorthands about that really miss a lot of the real stuff of the types. And so we've already had our friend dear Farah on previous calls, who is a sexually blind 6, but we want to get some of the sexual 6 flavor and bust a lot of the stereotypes of the way sexual 6s are often talked about, which is like in terms of counterphobic, which is something that we'll describe, and being kind of like 8s, but like anxious 8s or something. Like there's a lot of really bad stereotypes. And so before we get into that, I want to say a little bit about just 6 in general, because even though there are, I think, are a lot of 6s out in the world, in the wild, 6 is still not really well defined and well described. It's usually described as like a very loyal person.
or
then
aggressive person.
or aggressive, but not a lot of the real stuff. So 6 is the head type, and I think that the core of 6 is a real search and devotion to the truth, to try to find what's true. And like their neighbor, the 5, which has that really focused mental attention, the 6 has a more broad, holistic attentiveness to all that's happening around them. You know, they're paying a lot of attention. They're very curious. They're very awake mentally, and therefore they see a lot of stuff that other people don't see. This allows them to have like a really a gift for foresight and practical intuition. But it also means that they usually see contradictions. They see where things fall apart. So they're good at being a support for things or taking care of things where things might go wrong. Or they tend to be pretty funny, where they see contradictions. They see where things are absurd. And so being truthful, being real is very important to 6. But what ends up happening is they're searching for what's real and true, but they start to do it too conceptually, too much to the mind. And they end up arguing with themselves about what's real and true, doubting, overthinking, going back and forth and going to extremes. So you can kind of say whatever you could say about a 6. You could also say the opposite is true. So they can be brave and fearful. They can be funny and very serious. They can be very devoted and very fickle all at the same time. And they have a polarity between trusting in something and rebelling against it. So welcome, Beth and Marina, if you would please introduce yourselves.
I'm Marina. I am from Austin, Texas, but I am currently speaking to you from Brooklyn, New York. And John told me once almost 3 years ago that I was a sexual 6. So I believe him.
I've been lying this whole time.
You want to tell people what you do and where they can find you?
Yeah, I work in film and media production. I like working on music videos and commercials, but I'm not doing very much of that right now. So if you really want to meet me, I don't know why you would, but I have one to-go shift at a bar here in New York called Featherweight.
Let's go to the bar.
That's it. You could just come there because my Instagram is pretty shitty and pretty sleepy right now, and yeah, most of my work is on hold.
Yeah, I'm Beth, and I'm a sexual social 6, wing 7, trifix 629. I work for a cosmetology school, so I don't think anybody'd want to come there and get a haircut.
You never know.
I don't know.
Some high stakes gamblers might be coming your way.
You never know.
We actually might have some of those clientele.
You said it's at school that you teach at, or you manage?
Yeah, I just run the salon and, inventory and things like that. It seems really in my wheelhouse, as boring as that sounds.
What's funny is I'm a producer, so I manage all of our gear and our logistics, and I guess Bethany and I have a few things in common. We my concept of large picture is pretty spot on, and I can look down the line at seeing what we need and what needs to happen and what pieces need to fall together. And I actually thought they were very different, bar work and film work, but they're actually very similar as far as management. So
yeah, that's something I noticed with a lot of 6s is they have the ability to manage a lot of difficult projects. Just keep crossing your T's and dotting your I's, that sort of a thing. 6s are really good at not letting things fall through the cracks. My 2 closest friends, my best friend is a 6, and one of them, she's a self-pres 6, and she manages software projects, and she's just very detail oriented. So I'm interested to hear about how that comes together with the sexual drive, because I think a lot of the stereotypes around 6, people imagine a very responsible or safety oriented type of person.
Right.
And so you guys are speaking to still having some ability to manage a lot of details, but I'm interested to see how that comes together with the creativity and looseness of the sexual instinct for y'all, your attraction drive. Do you guys have any insight into that?
And I want to explain to whoever, all 3 listeners that we have, before we get into it, of some of the stereotypes about sexual 6.
Yeah, that's big too.
That might be useful, especially for Bethany and Marina to respond. As I said before, there's this concept within the Enneagram world called counterphobia that I don't think it's totally unuseful, but generally speaking, it's this idea that 6s deal with a lot of anxiety, and there's 2 basic approaches to dealing with anxiety. There's what they call phobia, and there's what they call counterphobia. And phobia is I avoid or somehow try to get away from or manage the thing that makes me anxious. Whereas counterphobia is going right up to the thing that makes me anxious and trying to deal with it in some way. And so generally speaking, based on Naranjo's instincts, blah, 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 from a long time ago, people generally call sexual 6 the counterphobic flavor of 6. And I think all 6s can be phobic and counterphobic. And I actually think that distinction is not particularly useful. And it also negates that the sexuality aspect of sexual 6. A lot of times the sexual 6 is stereotyped as being kind of like a hyper-reactive 8, like an 8 that wants to fight all the time. Often what's also not seen or not understood generally is that 6s that are sexual 6s are still 6s. And Emic is speaking to the sexual drive as we define it here in this podcast or whatever is not intimacy one-on-one as is normally out there because of, again, Naranjo bullshit, but is it the drive to put oneself ahead of the sexual competition. And so that means, displaying my energy and getting out there in some ways, having what we call attraction hooks, things that entice people, get people interested. And sometimes it can be hard to imagine a sexual 6 because the stereotype is that 6s are anxious and a little shy or fearful about putting themselves out there. So I was wondering, Bethany or Marina, if there's anything in there that you wanted to speak to about that.
For me, I think that I'm most disconnected from an 8 out of all the numbers in the Enneagram. So that was confusing for me to hear a lot of the things about them saying that it's like, counterphobia, like an 8. Maybe when I was younger, but as I've gotten older, it's, much, I don't know how Marina feels, but I don't feel like I admire 8s. I wish I had more of that, but I think I have more of an interconnectedness vibe about myself. So I kind of really think about everything I do and how it affects other people, so.
Yeah, I think I like really toe the line between that like overthinking capability of a 6, but I'm pretty feisty.
Yeah.
I think that a lot of times people that have known me for a very long time say like she really wouldn't hurt a fly. She like has like a pretty like gentle way about her, but I just don't really take any shit. So I really have never thought of myself as aggressive, but I don't necessarily shy away from conflict. And that really, to me, feels very contradictory. And like that's something that I struggle with a lot. But I'm always like weighing the outcome of every decision that I make. But I do tend towards head on.
What do you mean the conflict?
Like there is a lot of conflict in the decisions that I make. Like I don't think I make my decisions very effectively. But I don't like bury my head in the sand, really.
You're scared, but you're confronting.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, you don't read as scared.
Right. But like I'm, shaking.
Like I have seen Marina have to like confront people, drunk idiots at her bar, and clap back at people that give her lip and stuff like that. And Marina doesn't register visibly at all with anxiety.
Yeah.
I see it more in your close relationships, Marina. But like generally speaking, when I've seen you have to be confrontational, things like that, it's not easy to register. And so I was wondering, if you could speak more to, you talked about the anxieties that you have or the fears when you're confronting something. Can you say more about that?
Well, I don't feel like I am a point of authority on it very much. Like I feel small in this world. So in order to like step up on a platform and like assert myself, it takes a great leap of faith for me.
Mm-hmm.
And that I think is actually easier for me to do when I'm confronted, because there it's very black and white. Like I was wronged, and so I'm going to like stand up for myself. Where it's much harder for me is when it's an emotional situation, be it like me trying to go for something work related or go for something emotional, like I really like this person, I'd like to spend more time with them. In general, that type of dealing with things is harder for me than when I know concretely that like the decision that I'm making is correct. I like to be on the right side of history. When there is some question of whether or not I deserve something, it's much, much harder for me to take what theoretically could be for mine. And so I have a tendency to like really shy away from things that are risky for myself. If John was like, hey, Marina, I really need this, and so I need you to show up at 6 p.m. With a crowbar and a ski mask and bury this thing with me, I would be there in a heartbeat, and I would never think twice, and I would feel so good about it.
Marina, this is a public podcast. Don't share our personal
murders.
But I would like almost never ask John to like to do the same for me, because that would just be
true.
A little hard for me.
I've noticed that. I've noticed that you have a hard time asking for stuff.
Yes.
It seems like there's a dichotomy between certainty and uncertainty for 6s, like not being anxious and not being sure about something. How have you seen the tension between those two things, certainty versus uncertainty? Is it a thing where you guys go push out there with a lot of certainty, or you're just really anxious? Like, how do you see that dichotomy playing out for you?
Day to day, I'm pretty risk takey.
Mm-hmm.
But that's like with things that have not little consequence. Like I'm not very scared of things. Like right now, I left very safe Texas to come back here because I thought there was going to be more work here and my life was here. But like broader things like my career and like, I'm like pretty perfection driven with work stuff, and my relationship definitely, and my relationship with my parents. I think it's important to understand that I'm an only child. So I really like doing things on my own because I feel like I'm going to muck everything up for everyone else.
I feel like that too. Like if
Yeah.
it's just a consequence for myself, I don't care. But if it involves other people, then the stakes are a lot higher.
That's exactly right. Like I will dive from the highest diving board, but like I retype my text messages to the boyfriend that I've had for almost 4 years all the time.
Yeah.
Granted, he is fussy about his text messages.
Yes, but you know,
So is
in
it
my
that-
opinion, he deserves the best, and I don't know if I'm quite that.
So is it that your anxiety shows up more in certain areas? Like, does it show up more in attraction, or where does your anxiety show up?
Yeah, I think it's things that are very important to me is where when I get anxious, but like also like larger scale, like heavy things I freak out about. But like tiny things, like how messy my room is. Well, like my room's not messy, but you know, money, I can kind of like coast. But like what I'm going to do to satisfy my soul for the rest of my life, I'm kind of anxious about all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And like I'll miss train stops because I'm thinking about whether or not I was kind enough to the people on the train. But I can like not have clean clothes for like 2 weeks.
This is crazy. I relate to that so much.
Yeah.
I've cut people off in traffic and lost sleep over it.
Right.
I mean,
Yeah.
There's a responsibility to the collective in some way or something like that.
yeah. Yeah. And I mean, even when I was younger, before I had kids, you know, I just up and left in my car and lived in my car and stole from Walmart to eat and didn't think anything of it, but still lose sleep over cutting someone off in traffic. It's just bizarre.
Yeah, totally. I like have done things that are super rash, but I've always had really solid relationships with my parents, for instance. You know what I mean? Like I've had the same like one or two friends that I've had for 18 years, but was late to their wedding. You know, like there are things that are so important to me that I value, and those consume me with anxiety, but I don't take immaculate care of like my personal goals and stuff like that.
Just so we're clear, this is a pro stealing from Walmart podcast.
Yes.
Ah!
I went to the University of Missouri, and there are so many Walmarts there. So they kind of like indoctrinate you to like steal from them because they're the man. And like there's no better way to get back at, you know.
Yeah, they deserve it.
They do deserve it. They
true.
don't pay their employees. It's fucked up.
If you're not shoplifting, you're not living.
Right.
That's right.
You got to step up a level and start stealing from Amazon.
No, yeah, that's the next
Definitely.
Metal Gear Prime. But
I mean, I'm from Texas, so where I learned to shoplift was Nordstrom. Let's just be clear.
So I'm wondering, being a six and having this insecurity, but also being sexual types, you know, there's this need for the sexual instinct to get out there and to just, you know, show yourself off in some ways or to get the attention of people that you're attracted to. How does uncertainty or certainty show up when you're really into somebody? Like you doubt that you're into somebody, or it's like all hands on deck? And then like, how do you like capture somebody?
For me, I don't have a lot of anxiety around hooking someone. I guess maybe for me it's long term, like after. Then there's a lot of questioning, like, are you into me as much as I'm into you? Did I just do something or say something that ruined it all? A lot of neurosis around how I'm presenting myself. But it's weird because at the beginning of it, there is no anxiety. It's just like I can be very fierce in that way. It's after, when my mind catches up, then when there's actually stakes involved, you know?
That's
Like,
interesting.
That is interesting. A lot of times I see, especially with some sexual sixes or sixes in general, that they can really get out there and be bold initially. But then there's the contradiction of later on feeling like, oh, I don't trust anything. I don't know if anything that I just did is going to still be there. And so there's a lot of checking and even like letting go of everything that they were bold about. So there's this sort of back and forth thing that happens. But sixes can come off really, really bold a lot of times, it seems like.
Yeah, I think I come off really bold, but I don't I don't take that home with me. I'll like go on a date and be like great on a date, and I go home and I'm like, what just happened? That was the worst. I couldn't have done it more poorly. I'm never going to talk to that person again.
So when you're getting high off the attraction, chemistry, or whatever, like what is different there versus when you're thinking about it?
I just think it's like such a get for me. It's just like there's like a little performance mechanism that clicks on like when you are in a hot seat. And I think that is probably more so like my sexual drive as from like what I understand from this than maybe like my 6. Like one-on-one to me seems like a show like that's on fire, and like you really like it has like a beginning, a middle, and an end, and like you're doing it, and if you're either doing it well or you're losing at it. But then like when I step away from that and I have to like reconcile my feelings about what just happened or like what's going to happen down the line, it just is like doom and gloom for me.
Yeah. It's like the mind takes over and then starts analyzing everything. Like the drug is gone, so now you're left with yourself.
Part of the 6th thing is being disconnected generally from the instinctual self. So when you're in the hot seat on a date, then you're kind of more purely instinct, right, in the sexual drive. So you're not in that thinking, head chatter analysis place, right? You're just going. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And it for me, when I'm on set, like at work, like it's like that too. The 6 hours before I get to work when we're doing like prep stuff, I'm so scared. I'm sweating through my shirt. But when I'm on set, there's just like, I feel like there's nothing I couldn't do, excuse me. And then afterwards, I'm like convinced that they're not going to pay me because they hated me.
So it sounds like, I mean, is there a way that you guys put yourself in the hot seat, so to speak, like intentionally, because it seems like it's not plagued by all that doubt?
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
Because I mean, that could be like what people are picking up on when they're labeling it counterphobic.
Yeah.
There's a certain clarifying quality, it sounds like, when you're in the midst of something. Is that true?
I feel like I noticed that not just with sexual 6s, but just 6s across the board, that there are a lot of these high pressure situations that 6s run towards because you don't have time to think when you're on the red line. And I notice a lot of comedians are mostly 6s, and they're terrified of getting on stage, but they get on stage and it's like there's no time to think. You can just, come to life and be on. But then they get off stage and you think, oh, this person's so cool and so funny, and then you start talking to them and it's just like this really anxious, self-conscious person, and so it seems like the moment and being on is like a removal of any doubt for a 6, and they can be bold and they can step into something larger than themselves.
Yeah, I really identify.
I think a lot of emergency medical people and firemen stuff are 6s.
Military.
And military. It's because of that. It's because of that. It's like here, right there is a clear and present danger. I can see it, and it's intense as fuck. And so I know, and I'm just going, right? I just know, right? As opposed, you can't do a bunch of analysis, head chatter in that situation.
Yeah, it's almost like the 6's release. Like it's their one time to just breathe, which is opposite of what one might think.
So is it that you guys create these situations? Or you're attracted to these situations that are kind of like, high pressure because in that moment it kind of like the mind turns off? Or is it just so you wait for it to come whenever it comes?
I don't think I make high stress situations for me because in anticipation of them, it does stress me out so much I would like to avoid them. But they are very attractive to me. Like, any job I've ever had has been like pretty crunch time. But I don't have like a lot of drama in my life.
I was going to say you don't like those types of situations, but your job is that situation all the time.
Yeah, it is. It like all the time. All of them, even like the ones I don't like.
Yeah, and like a New York City bar is not like a other city bar. And Featherweight is its own world too. Like it's like this dark makeout bar with like a lot of dark, it's very dark and densely packed and a lot of idiots. And Marina is like, not a tall person. And so, her having to command a lot of people, and like I don't know if I've seen you throw anybody out, Marina, but I've definitely seen you put people in their place.
I usually don't do that. I don't like to like get that close to potential violence or whatever. I also don't really like belittling people. To me, is like a little further than my comfort zone. So I'm the only girl at featherweight. So I always work with men, and usually men are better at kicking people out of the bar. But I am usually the person that decides, like, this person has been overserved, this person shouldn't be here. But more than that, I'm really good at noticing when someone is making other people uncomfortable.
Yeah, that's true. For sure.
And I try to protect the people around me. But also on set, I'm like that. You know, like I'm a little bit more like, this blank isn't working because it's like causing a lot of problems for someone else. Like, we need to stop it. But I'm not the one that's like, hey, we shouldn't do this anymore. I'm like, hey, you know, John, I don't think we should do this anymore. Can you help me execute us not doing this anymore?
Yeah, just the high pressure situations and being attracted to them. Bethany, is that something that's there in your salon work? Is that a high pressure job?
Yeah, actually, we have about 250 students at a time, and then of course a lot of guests. A lot of our clientele that come in are picky bitches, so there's a lot of conflict going on. A lot, yeah. And you know, honestly, I love it. Like, as soon as there's a lot of fist fighting between students, I'm the one that'll jump in. If I have to think about it before, I'm like, Texas. Oh no, I'd never do that. But at the school, it's like I'm looking for it. You know, it's such a strange feeling to have that. Like, when you're in the zone, that's who you are. But then if I'm sitting here at home, I'm like, I can't believe I did that today. You know?
No.
That's really interesting to me. I know Naranjo tried to call the sort of 6 dichotomy, strength and beauty, but I mean, I don't think that's accurate. But I don't know. I
never related to that.
Yeah, yes. I don't know what to call this, but there's something there about, you know, the 6 thing of just being on whenever shit's on the line. It's like, boom, I'm there, and I'm not, like, I've overcome my fear. I don't have time to think about it, so I can be really bold.
Do either of you spend a lot of time like worrying about what if that kind of stuff happens, or is it only in the after effect where you're like, oh my God, why did I do that, or I shouldn't have done that, or etc.?
I don't know. I think both. Mm-hmm. I like run things through my head beforehand in an unhealthy way. I asked John to get on the phone with me before this call because I was like, I'm going to screw this up. Can you tell me what it is that you need from me so I can hit your marks?
This is definitely the last podcast episode we're ever doing, because Marina has just dragged it through the mud.
Ruined our podcast.
Terrible.
But having said that, I think the logical thing would have been to listen to an episode to like get a little bit of reference, and I didn't do that.
Threw yourself into the fire, didn't you?
Oh yeah, look at me. So 6.
Yeah. So anyway, I find this very interesting because as Emeka is speaking to, one of the, like, again, background of the Enneagram and the development of these instincts and blah, 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 is that Naranjo learned the Enneagram from Oscar Achaza, who's the man who really synthesized the modern Enneagram. Like, the Enneagram personality is really Achaza's contribution. And then Naranjo was a psychologist, and he used different personality disorders as a way of trying to ground the Enneagram that was Achaza's very mystical kind of system into some practical psychology. And in some ways, he had a lot of really great insights and innovations. And in other ways, he really missed the mark. And one of the weird phenomenon in the Enneagram world is that, like, people just want to keep holding on to Naranjo's interpretations of things. And so they will justify or explain or try to make things fit into the concept rather than adjusting the concept to fit real people. So strength and beauty were 2 words that Naranjo used, and people have subsequently tried to interpret it in various ways. You know, maybe this is what he meant, or blah, blah, blah. And I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but one of the features of sexual 6 that Naranjo was describing in that term was he was saying that male sexual 6s and female sexual 6s will either emphasize strength or beauty. So usually males will emphasize this appearance of strength and being very vital, like badass sexual dude. And women will be like play up their femininity and their beauty and even sort of like a kind of like a helpless quality sometimes, but at the same. What'd you say, David?
Do you know that word, coquette?
Yeah, coquette.
Yeah.
But and conversely though, like these sort of macho sexual 6 men will display what you call quote unquote feminine traits sometimes, of like hypersensitivity, or what did you like this about me kind of thing. And female sexual 6s will be this sort of over effeminate character, and then have this sort of take charge masculine character. So there's sort of sliding between poles. And so in terms of like the way that you present yourself physically, in terms of your appearance or the way that you try to attract, does any of that resonate, or does it feel like it's just sort of off the mark?
For me, some of it resonates. It's always been very important to me to be extremely feminine. And I've had some inner issues with like, do I appear masculine? I played sports in high school. Lots of chatter about that. But honestly, as I've gotten older, I don't know. I find that I've, cut my hair and I had a fade for a while like a guy. I don't know if I was challenging myself to grow some within that, but I really don't feel like on the regular basis. Like I know Marilyn Monroe is an example that they've used for the beauty of the sexual 6. And I don't really feel like I need to be that way. I don't know if I'm making sense here, but it doesn't.
Yeah, you
so
are.
It's not a.
You're speaking to that there is though a lifelong there's energy around that polarity, is what you're saying, right?
Yeah, for sure. Like for me, one thing that I found interesting is challenging that, like challenging people's idea of femininity.
Can you give an example?
Well, with my hair, several years ago I decided, I guess, forgive me for being a nerd, but Miley Cyrus shaved her head, and I'm like, I'm fucking doing it too. Okay, so I did it, and then I expected in my head that when I went out, people were all of a sudden going to think, oh, she's a manly woman, and it really had the opposite effect. A lot more people approached me. It made me feel good, because then it really did quiet a lot of that thought in my head that I had to fit a certain image.
Yeah, it seems like sexual 6s, in terms of sexual display, I've noticed sexual 6s can really push it. And even at the time, back in the day when Marilyn Monroe was becoming famous, that was really controversial. Her whole display was a lot for that time. And so I feel like in terms of all the sexual types that, in terms of how loud they can get, that boldness of 6 to test those boundaries and to be edgy, I think sexual 6 are just have some of the wildest displays that I've seen. But at the same time, it's more interesting for me to see what sexual 6s or any sexual type is like in just like a normal person who's not like a fucking musician who has like a crazy display, but just someone who goes to a job every single day and has to be a responsible adult in some fashion. So it's really interesting to see how that shit shows up for you guys.
I don't think I push my shock value very much, but I'm like very petite and pretty feminine looking already, like out of the womb. So I have like big black tattoos, and I don't really wear a lot of makeup. And when I do, John, if you remember that, I always ask you guys if I look more masculine when I have a lot of makeup on, because it's like kind of funny for me. I don't like wear it well, or I feel like I don't.
Yeah, okay.
I'm like funny like that. I don't have like the bandwidth to put a lot of energy into how I look, but I like to look good.
So Marina's very pretty, but like she she'll put on makeup and be like, oh, am I doing this right? But it's like, yeah, definitely. And so there's that 6 thing of like
questioning everything.
It's not just questioning, but it sometimes my read from Marina and other 6s is this like there's a little bit of feeling silly about playing a role.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so it's like the role, like I know that I'm playing it in some way, and like we all play roles. It's not just a 6 thing, but just like to say that like, oh, there's almost like a reluctance or a fighting with the role I'm playing. And so there's like, David, you've often spoken to the thing that 6s have, where it's like they got to kind of hat tip to the fact that they know that they're playing a role, and it's not really like, no, I know that I'm just not all in on this, but like I'm not that big a deal, or whatever it might be. But there's sort of a acknowledgement of kind of like a sheepishness or something like that. It's like
hardly fighting the line to 3 in a way. It's like 3 is part of the core of 6. So you're kind of wanting to say, I don't really believe in this mask that I'm wearing or something.
Can you say more, David, to like flesh that out?
Let's see. Okay. Well, I mean, to me, using the traditional lines of integration, disintegration, I generally think of those that whatever your disintegration line is or type in the Riso Hudson schema is you've kind of got that whole package, so to speak, in you. Whereas the integration type, which would be 9 in the case of 6, is kind of something you're less you don't know as well, right? And you're kind of so 6s have the whole 3 package, and in some sense they're fighting against having that. And that's in a way part of how the whole truth focus of 6 comes up, is maybe having a sense of the fact that personality itself, which is kind of what 3 represents, in a more universal way, is sort of the mask that is personality, if you will. And so 6 is kind of, wanting to see what's underneath the mask in kind of most contexts, right?
And on that same spectrum, like I kind of see 6 as between 3 and 9, like they've got the lines to both. And, the 9 part of the 6 is sort of like, I just want to be me. I just want to be myself. And then the 3 part is like, I know that I have to fulfill certain obligations. I have to play certain roles. I have to do these things to make sure I either get the credit or the acknowledgement or the security. I earn the approval or I earn the attraction, whatever it is. It's like 6s have this hard worker quality to them. And there's always this vacillation between like the kind of 9 in them that's like, I just want to be little old me. It's like there's a little bit of like, both 9 and 6 have this sort of anti-narcissism clause where it's like, I'm just me, like I'm not a big deal or whatever. And at the same time, I know if I want to get ahead or if I want what I want, I have to go do whatever. But it's like a kind of begrudgingness. And so I think in sexual 6, it's like, I know that I can be very attractive. I know that I can really get people's attention. I can play the role. I can excite them. And, sexual 6s are very provocative. I can do all that. And I kind of fun doing that. But also there's a part of me that's at war with having to do that. Does that resonate, Marina and Beth?
Yeah.
For sure.
So can you say more about like how that feels or how it's experienced?
Well, let me see if I can translate what John said.
Yeah, Emeka is my translator.
Well, I think what John's trying to speak to is that 6 are between 3 and 9, and something that really stands out about 6s is the ethos of hard work, that I have to earn it in a way. And so as a sexual type, does that show up for you in feeling like I have to work hard and I have to earn being wanted in this way? Or is there some part of your display that you feel like I have to work hard to feel like I deserve it?
Or to prove my attractiveness, or to prove that I'm a valuable partner, or prove that I'm desirable.
Oh yeah, absolutely. That's that's how I jump out of bed every day. Is like, I have to be the one that like showed up at that time because I said I would, and like that makes me reliable, right? So like I hit that mark. When there's a fight between me and someone that I'm intimate with, it is usually boils down to like, well, it's because I'm not good enough, and you're making up for the fact that I'm not good enough by like extending yourself a little bit further to like make exceptions for me. And this is an example of like where that exception wasn't made, and that's why we're having a fight. But then also sometimes I feel very much like I deserve things that I don't get, because I do try really hard, and I am reliable, and I am smart and independent, but I need everyone to know that I'm independent. I hate thinking that like someone thinks I got something the easy way.
That's interesting.
That is that's a very cool point. I'm going to get back to it, but I want Beth to answer.
Yeah, I know that it is very important for me to feel reliable as well. I feel like that when I'm interested in someone or something like that, I kind of have to figure out how I can serve them to get them to stay. There's a lot of feeling of like unworthiness, and I, like she said, I got to go on that for a minute because it's in my head. But I feel like that, everything I get, I do have to earn it. And even I was having a discussion with a coworker today about how the students that come from wealthy families, it's kind of like, you've already got everything. I'm going to go for the underdog because they're the ones that need the support and will appreciate the things I'm going to give them,
Yeah, that's a very clear distinction for six for me in terms of the six mindset, and just to see that coming from a sexual six perspective is really interesting to me. There's a lot of mistyping, as you guys know, at a type 4, especially sixes, because there's some overlap between 6 and 4 in terms of reactivity and drama. And one distinction that I feel like is important is I don't think 4s have the same ethos of having to earn and to work hard. Like I can't just, there's almost like a little bit of like that Prince quality of I deserve it. Whereas sixes feel like you have to work hard. You cannot just be handed anything. You have to earn it. And so I'm curious about that, John, if you can speak to how does this perspective hit you as a 4, this having to work hard for shit?
Yeah, it's interesting because I feel like as a sexual 4, like there's a certain kind of hard work that's gone into trying to be like an interesting character, like I know a lot of things and then I'm artistic and then I've like I'm fit and all this kind of stuff. So like here's all these different facets of and I can dance well, all these like facets of the package that I represent, but it's like I did something, but it's not like I'm earning something. And as you're speaking to Emeka, there is a little bit more of like, and I've joked about this in the podcast before, but like your gift is me, it's like the criticism of the 4. It's like, but I'm this unique, special thing, right? And like I'm in your life because it's like just being there is like I'm not with anybody else, like I don't spend time with anybody. So yeah, it's interesting, and and Marina is dating a social 4. So I don't know, Marina, if that difference of needing to earn it versus that like I'm the gift thing shows up for you.
Oh no, I'm with a star, and I know it.
That's hilarious.
And like Brant will have really bad days, and I'm just like, whoa, look at you shine! I'm so lucky.
Sweet boy.
But then when he's like giving me a hard time, I'm like, do you know how fucking lucky you are? It's there, sure. But no, I first learned some components of being a 6 when Ilaria, John's wife, was helping me understand myself in regard to my partner who's a 4. And when I'm highly reactive with Brant is when I'm feeling most insecure about myself. And when he is highly reactive with me is when he's feeling most like he has to provide like constant like gratification, like you're doing this right, I like you, you know what I mean? Like I think to him some of those things are very understood, and for me they're not. So yeah,
like the validation
exactly. Yeah, that's honestly like one of the only things that we like feud about. We don't really very much, we've been together for a long time, so we don't really have a lot of miscommunication. But when my feelings are hurt, it's usually feeling not valued or good enough. And I don't think that's ever been a insecurity Brant has had ever.
What insecurities does he have? Exactly.
Because I hope he doesn't listen to this, but I'm sure you guys understand. Like that's just not a way I approach the world.
Right.
That like they're gonna love me is not something I've ever felt.
So
but usually they do. So I don't know why I haven't learned that lesson.
that almost with 6s, they have that kind of anti-narcissistic quality that was brought up earlier, where they almost put them. It feels to me like they almost put themselves down purposefully because they feel like it's the right thing to do.
Yeah.
It almost feels like it's a safety net for them. Like, hey, if I'm down here, at least no one can put me down further.
That's right. Taking control of it.
And I think that's kind of where that worker bee mentality comes from. Like, you cannot come at me saying, like, you're not good enough or you didn't accomplish blank because I was busy the whole time. I gave my hardest. I worked the hardest here. I showed up the earliest. I left the latest.
Yeah.
So it covers all of my potential holes of like criticism.
Yeah, and I mean you do that in like not just for other people, but you do that for yourself too. Like it seems like your athletic working out thing is like sort of in that same zone, right?
Yeah. Well, I just think I'm kind of nervous. I'm like a nervous person, and so exercise makes me tired, and then I'm less nervous for like half an hour.
But do you use that kind of system of like, okay, well, they can't, hate on me because I've worked really hard and I put myself down, so there's no way that they can put me down any further than
no,
I put myself down. Do you use that kind of as like a safety net towards your own brain putting you down? Does it make sense?
We would think so, yeah.
Yeah.
I definitely do. I mean, one thing that just dawned on me about this as we're talking is if I already know my faults, you can't hurt me with that. Like I already know, so it's not as painful if somebody's like, you were lazy today. Well, yeah, bitch, I know I was lazy today. Like
I was lazy on purpose though.
And I guess for a long time, I thought it was something to do with control, but I don't think it is. I think it's like you said, like a safety net. Like it hurts less if I already am aware.
Mm-hmm.
It's like nothing will surprise you.
I wonder if it's a way that sixes, like Nancy's saying, like let's say something good is happening. It's like I'm going to find a way to sabotage what's happening so that I don't have to step further. Like, and I see this happen all the time where they're on the edge of something great happens and they find a way to just like, let me fuck this up real quick.
I do that to, like, I'm a professional at it. How can I not do that?
It's a great question.
Nancy,
I would actually
I'm looking at you.
No, because that's something I do. I am very sick, so don't look at me. Mm-mm.
Wait, what's the question? How do you not what?
The question, I said that sixes will find themselves on the edge of greatness, like something great is going to happen, and they will self-sabotage. I mean, we've talked about how fuck things up for themselves a lot of the time, and Marina is saying like, how the fuck do I stop myself from doing that?
Yeah, I would love to know.
Anti-narcissism thing. It feels like sixes will not let themselves be great.
No, you can't.
No, absolutely. That's a really good question, and part of it is, it's not a quick fix. Obviously, it's like first, I mean, being able to take in new impressions. So, and what I mean by that is that types on the triangle 9, 3, and 6 have particular difficulty with what I would call like taking in new impressions, because there's a dynamic between the heart, body, and mind, and every type has its own dynamic, but particularly in those triangle types, one center is split from the operation of the other two. So in the case of the 6, the mental center splits off from the body and emotional center. So how that results often is that the 6 is thinking, and they're doing, but often the thinking is out of sync with the doing. And for example, like you might be at a job that you really hate, and you hate your boss and hate your coworkers, and you're criticizing them, and they're doing everything wrong. At the same time, outwardly, you're performing your actions and duties as necessary and doing them really well. So no one would intuit that you're having all these complaints inside until something boils over.
And could that be why sometimes, it doesn't happen to me all the time, but there are periods in my life where I feel really ungrounded?
Yeah, absolutely.
Super out of control.
It's because it's like the head is operating independent of the other centers.
And I can have like plenty of money, and like my fridge can be full, and I can be really fit, but still feel super out of control.
Absolutely. And so, for all types on the triangle, they have to work to be able to take in impressions from all three centers. I mean, this is true for everybody, but particularly with triangle types, it's learning to connect the dominant center. So in the case of 6, the head; in the case of 9, the body; in case of 3, the heart, connect them to the other two centers. And so, for a 6, it's like I don't know, whatever there might be insecurity about, or there's a potential for greatness in. It's like you can, if we do something that's like that we're really good at, we're not doing it for the first time, generally speaking. And so you can notice when you do something really well, and you can own it. And what'll happen though is that the mind can recognize that then the body and heart are sort of still not on the same page.
Yeah.
And so there has to be a process of consciously working. And what I mean by that is you could engage in some kind of meditation or breath work, but some kind of intentional time and space given to getting the body and heart and mind on the same page, and knowing and being able to recognize and own when you do something well, or do something or have the capacity to do something well. But also, this is kind of complicated, but it gets into the anti-narcissism thing we've been talking about, where all the like, oh, I'm not a big deal kind of talk that 6s give themselves is actually a kind of narcissism.
Oh, yeah.
And And so, part of what we do when we're learning the Enneagram, part of the point of it is to learn to see our personality and not take our personality personally, right? Because it's like we're not our personality, and that's not just a cliche. It's like the personality is like a body type. It's like we have a body, but we're not just our bodies. And same thing with our personality. It's a psychological structure, and it has certain gifts and certain liabilities. And part of what that means is that we have certain gifts, whether we recognize them or not. And part of the sixth thing is a certain kind of narcissism gets in the way when they see there's some really great things about their personality, who they are, whatever. And then the sixth brain wants to get in there and go, but what about, or not so good, or maybe I'm gonna doubt what I know, or doubt myself in this moment, and just sort of subvert all the effort I've done. And part of what that is that the personality seeks always to keep a certain equilibrium, and it's different for every type, but 9 really represents that equilibrium. But it keeps us normal, and I mean normal in quotation marks. So like we all have our baseline sense of what's psychologically normal, and 6s get really attached to a normal where they succeed a little bit and they work really hard, but it's kind of like they don't make it past the finish line in some way, or they don't make it past the finish line first. And it is self-protective. It is a way to shield themselves against the attack of their inner critic. And 6s and 1s and 2s are superego types that have a really strong internalized sense of right and wrong, and what they should and shouldn't do. And that it's very punishing towards them. It's like an inner voice, a critic. And sometimes a lot of the 6's inner world can be lived out as a defense against that inner critic. Does that make sense?
That's a really good point.
One of the ways that narcissism weirdly shows up with 6s is that with the fear that I am going to be the special target of the bad thing that's going to happen.
Yeah. That's big.
That's a certain kind of narcissism in a weird way. Right? True. I'm going to be the one selected for the lightning bolt that's going to hit.
That I had a experience a couple years ago with I discovered a sexual 6 artist. You guys can look him up. His name is Serpent with Feet. It's one word. And I was just blown away because this guy's display, he's a musician, he's a singer, is just so wild. He has like a mix of, it's just really strangely bizarre and really ballsy, his display. And so I was just like thinking, this guy is super creative. His sound is nothing that like I've never heard before. And he was coming to Chicago, so I wanted to go check him out. And I ended up just being really disappointed, not necessarily, because I just saw so much potential in his whole artistry, and he sort of got on stage and did his songs, but then he started reading from books and was telling the crowd of these are my artistic influences and these are the people that I look up to. But he spent a huge chunk of the show reading from undermining his own like artistic genius. Like I was like, I know that you're pulling from these people and I don't even know who these people are, but you yourself, like you are, the thing. You are the reason that I'm here. I don't give a fuck about these 4 people that you're inspired by. And so I ended up watching some interviews, and this was a reoccurring thing that it was almost felt like a self-protective thing. People were interested in him. Serpent with Feet, you've created this whole you created this really interesting character, and you've got this really crazy look, and people are interested in you, but you're subverting the whole thing by telling people that, these 4 other, my elders that I look up to, and I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for them. And I'm like, dude, it's you. I'm here for you, and I'm not here for them.
Wear the crown.
So I wonder if that's something you guys relate to in any sort of way, that like you need, in a way to sort of avoid criticism or the anti-narcissism, is to like look for some kind of precedent of, I'm doing this because of this thing that's come before, or I'm doing this because, this thing's already established. So you can't.
Or like giving at least like excessive credit to my influences as if it's not mine. Like it's hard for me to own my thing as cool, as being the cool thing.
Yeah. I got to jump in here real quick, but David and I have done a few calls, and one thing that really helped me is when he had told me that a lot of times as a 6 that you're giving away the special things about you to someone else, and it relates to looking for that quote unquote father figure to say that is okay within you. I really feel that heavy. Like it's hard for me to say, yeah, I am good at this. I have to say I'm good at this because somebody else found that. I mean, there's a constant drive within myself to find that person in this world that's going to recognize those things about me and give me permission to be that.
Wow.
Beth,
Yeah.
I see you, and you got permission now.
Oh, my life has changed.
Beth is a star now. She's a star.
Yes.
Or the crown.
Yeah, the crown is yours, Queen.
Yeah.
It's John giving you his gift.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, the 4 is that's what we're here for. Is
To bestow.
got it. Now I'm gonna go away.
No, it just really is a real thing there. And I did a breathwork session with Ilaria, and that was the first time in my life. And it did take her being present to allow that for me. But that was the first time in my life that I'd ever felt some sense of control, not control, maybe presence within my own body and in my own world without anybody else giving me that permission.
Needing to bless it.
Yeah.
Your own authority.
Yeah.
Your own authority. Yeah, that's good.
And I also think that a lot of 6s, like we guys talked about, can really seem bold and really seem like authoritative, but then there's this sort of collapse, like it's not. I see a lot of like the 6s that have more assertive fixes can really get out there with strong opinions or have a really big display, like that serpent with feet guy. Like I was looking at his display and I was thinking, this is so fucking wild. I bet this guy is like the most, he's so fucking creative and this and that. It's so bold. But at the same time, completely undermining it and saying, like this is coming from this and this place. I just, it's not about me. It's about, where I got it from, and I have to get permission, or I have to prop myself up with something else to give myself permission to, to be great. I feel like that's something that's very specific to 6, and for a lot of people who are stuck between 6 and 4, that there is definitely some narcissism with the image types in like taking the crown, so to speak.
4s already know they're special, and they're just trying to figure out how to like actually embody it. Whereas like 6s don't want to own that they're special. It's like an opposite thing in a certain way.
The cockiness that 4s have sometimes, it's like, it's not 6s.
It's not 6.
Yeah, it's not 6 at all.
But like 6s don't mind. We're not
other people are doing it.
I surround myself by 4s, and I'm like, whoa, I want to be more like a 4.
You can't do it, but you're not.
I can't do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, poor Marina. It's like, before all this COVID shit, like almost every week it'd be like me, her boyfriend, who's like my best friend, and then Marina. And so she's around these 2 4s, and just we're ironic and bitching, and
but it's like really comfortable for me because I'm like, they're like, oh, like doing their thing, their 4 thing. And like they're just like so shiny and bright, and then every once in a while I'll be like, "Look at me, guys! Like I can do a backflip. Like look." Then that's it.
Look what I can do.
Yeah, exactly. But it's really comfortable for me that both John and Brant take center stage because I always feel like I have to like assert myself, and when I'm with my closer people, I can rest a little. And the friendships and relationships that I've had longevity, usually they do take the forefront of the stage, and I like that.
Yeah, my 2 closest friends are 6s, and I've had a reoccurring pattern of getting really close with 6s, or they get really close to me, and I'm just like, all right, and so it's
definitely. Oh no, I don't think that John and Brent asked for this.
Yeah, like I've just
can't get rid of her.
and at some point I realized it was kind of like I don't necessarily see myself as a super confident guy, but I have my personality is self-assured, whether or not I feel that way or not. And I think 6s can really attach to that. It's like, I'm someone who seems sure about what they're doing, and 6s don't, and so it's a good match in that sense.
That was one of the things that I thought was really valuable on the 8 call, where we were getting at how like what leads to the appearance of confidence in 8s, whether they feel it or not, is just that like that action orientation in the 8 personality, and how that like I don't know. Anyway, I thought that was like such a great humanizing moment for the 8s.
Automatic mobilization looks like confidence,
right? Mm-hmm. I might not feel confident about something, but if it's about doing, I can just do it.
The impulse coming from the body versus is like, whereas six, like we got the 8, 4, and 6 on this call, which are the 3 reactive types.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting where we have a similar vibe or something going on, but it's coming from different centers. And from the 8, it's this immediate action, orientation. Whereas the 6 in the head, it gets caught in the head.
Or they'll just jump into it before they have a chance to.
Yeah, exactly.
Fuck it up with
something's presented without me having time to think about it, I'm in.
Totally.
If I got to think about it, not happening.
But yeah, the narcissism thing is pretty important, at least based on what I've seen from the 4s that I do know, and the 6s that even the social blind 6s. It's not as apparent with social blind 6s because there's not that sort of social hierarchy piece, but there is a sense of I'm going to undercut myself, undercut my own sexual display, or undercut, like try to prop myself up with some other precedent because I can't be cool and great on my own. Whereas 4s, as much as 4s can be self-conscious, they can really step into that star role and like I'm special.
I mean, one of the distinctions, like 4s can self-sabotage, but yeah, as you're saying, they don't feel uncomfortable stepping into some kind of attention-getting role. But 4s self-sabotage will stem from self-hatred, whereas the 6s thing will stem from that super ego calculation.
Yeah, I don't want to be criticized, and I can't. If I'm great on my own, that I could be pulled down and criticized by somebody.
Okay, a 6 that thinks they're a 4 does a lot of, in my experience, kind of granular. It's a lot of lists of things that are 4-like qualities, and it doesn't have that sort of what for me abstractly feels from the heart emotional center.
Yes,
it has a liquid quality to it, right?
Right.
And a certain, just somebody who's a 4 is just inadvertently being a 4, right? And as opposed to bullet points, so to speak, not literally, right? But it's got that.
It's like
choppy,
argumentative, right? Like
it's argumentative,
like trying to make a case versus just, just being
right. And I see a lot of 6s poking. I mean, it's of course a general 6 thing, but this is full of shit, like poking holes in the description. This doesn't match up with this other thing, and so it's this way of trying to prove it, and that's a very head center kind of a thing.
There's a lot of poking holes.
Whereas like 4 won't, like, I mean, like 4s can pick holes for sure, but it's like I don't need to prove it to you.
Yes,
that's it. It's 6s need others to agree.
Whereas like part of the 4 thing is like, I know it and I'm gonna leave. Like
I'm gonna take my knowing with me. So
yeah, it's like
bitches.
Yeah, like because I mean I get into political debates all the time, and what I find really funny is how I'm so confident in my opinion that other people get pissed off.
That's one of the favorite things I love about like people getting mad at John. It's just like people are so mad that how dare you have confidence in what you're saying.
Like, because I know my shit, so I can like back it up, but I don't back it up as a way to like prove it like in a court case to convince them. I'm just like, this is what it is, and if you don't see it that way, you're an idiot. And then they get so mad, and it's so funny. But it's like, it's that 4 thing of like, no, it's me, like I'm all in my little like insular self-absorption or whatever, and like fuck you, and I can peace out at any time.
Right. No, that's a really good distinction.
Well, thank you, Marina and Beth, for being here.
Well, thank you, Beth. It was like nice to like see that it's not just me, right?
Yeah,
it's not just
you. It wasn't just you that fucked it up.
Yeah,
no,
there was another one.
No, Beth fucked up too. It was great.
Yeah.
No, this is really great because sexual 6 is a really misunderstood type.
Yes,
and people have a very hard time holding a mental image of how the sexual instinct and the 6 can come together. And so I think you guys did a really great job, and I appreciate you guys being so open and honest and willing to, lay some of your insecurities and your strengths and all those kinds of things on the line.
Yeah, this has been great.
Yeah, Beth, go get him, Tiger.
Right, I'm ready.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Marina, you're supposed to say that to yourself.
Oh. Well, maybe I'll learn. No, that's why I date a 4, is so I can overhear him saying it to himself, and I'll be like, oh, that's what I'm supposed to do, right?
All right. I'm gonna.
All right, guys.
Bye.
Bye, y'all.
Bye.
Thanks, guys.